This episode of Around the Oval is brought to you by Todd Pennington with Revolution Mortgage.
Hey, Ohio State fans, Alex Gleitman here, back with another edition of Around the Oval, brought to you by Todd Pennington with Revolution Mortgage. The Buckeyes are now 25% through the regular season, 3 games in out of 12 regular season games. They are 2-1 after a 41-20 win over Tulsa, probably way too close for comfort for many fans. And I think we'll probably agree, media members alike. But nonetheless, a win is a win, and they are 2-1 heading into a home game, their last out of conference opponent against Akron, before starting the meat of their Big Ten schedule with a game at Rutgers on October 2nd. To break down how Ohio State has looked over the first 3 games of the year, as well as how to maybe fix, I guess we should say, some of the issues on both offense and defense for the Buckeyes, is our X's and O's expert, Ross Fulton. Ross, thanks for joining the show. Appreciate you being here.
Yeah, happy to be here, Alex.
Awesome, man. Well, we'll dive right into it. I think, both of us would probably agree we didn't expect Ohio State to be here at this point in the season. Not necessarily 2-1, because I thought they could drop the Oregon game. I've been saying that for a few months now, and they did, but more so how they've looked doing it to this point. I don't think anyone expected, well, maybe some people expected, I should say, the defense to maybe not look so stellar after what they saw last year, but definitely expected some improvement, at least 50% improvement. We haven't seen that by any means, but I think nobody expected the offense to look as rusty and inconsistent as it has at times this year. Just general thoughts. What's your take on Ohio State through 25% of the regular season thus far?
Yeah, I mean, I think, echoing some of those points, I was definitely, before the season, sort of pumping the brakes in terms of the defense. And, even more so now and seeing it in action, I'm not sure why exactly we should have expected a ton of improvement in terms of just how young they are, especially in the back 7, which is where a lot of the problems were last year. And then, probably at the one position they couldn't have injuries, in the secondary, they've had them. I think that I probably expected, to be frank, that using the course of the offseason, the defensive scheme would improve in the sense of not being quite as predictable as it was last year. I think that's a disappointment. And I think that probably I would have expected to have more of a consistent pass rush and just overall play, frankly, from the defensive line, which is the one area where they had experience and has maybe been the biggest disappointment. And then, offensively, it's funny. They're good. They're still number 1 in SP plus in offense. So, I think Ryan Day this week said something along the lines of, it just hasn't quite clicked at all times together, both the passing game and the running game. And I think that's a fair way to put it. They threw the ball well against Oregon. They ran it well, more or less for the most part, against Tulsa, but it hasn't sort of married up, and they haven't been able to kind of put it all together. But I think I personally just thought that things, with a brand new quarterback would just sort of roll along as they have. And I think it's been a little bit more of a learning curve and making the offense work together, perhaps than some expected.
Yeah. And, I think it just shows how spoiled Ohio State fans have been the last 3 seasons, with Dwayne Haskins in 2018, Justin Fields in 2019 and 2020. Those are 2 first-round picks at Ohio State. When was the last time Ohio State had a first-round pick at quarterback before those guys? Obviously, Troy Smith was an excellent college quarterback, throwing the ball and running the ball. JT Barrett, excellent college quarterback, more so running the ball, not as much throwing the ball. And, we're not even going to talk about Joe Bowserman. Braxton Miller, I would probably have somewhere in between Troy and JT. But, for me, I think there's perspective there. And I think some of the things and mistakes that Stroud has made have been magnified by just the overall feeling around this team. If the defense was playing well, if Chris Olave, Garrett Wilson, the tight ends were catching balls that they're supposed to catch, the offensive line wasn't making penalties on key plays in numerous games now, I think you might feel a little bit differently about CJ Stroud than a lot of fans have through 3 games. And then I think the other thing to point at, let's forget the defense for a second. We'll talk about the offense in a minute, going deeper on the X's and O's side of things. But they have 5 offensive linemen, either new to the lineup or playing new positions. Nick Petit-Frere, right tackle last year, left tackle this year. Thayer Mumford, left tackle last year, left guard this year. Harry Miller would have been, he played a little center last year, but he would have been a new center, but he's been out with a health related issue. Luke Whippler, new starter. Paris Johnson, new starter at right guard, and DeJuan Jones, new starter at right tackle. And I think any college coach you talk to, any football coach at any level would tell you offensive line, is probably the position group that takes the longest to kind of gel and get rolling and clicking on all cylinders throughout the year, especially when you have 5 guys either new to the lineup or playing new positions. So I think that those 2 things right there are big factors in Ohio State's offensive struggles. And then I think defense, we've talked about it ad nauseum. They really didn't do anything different. The injury to Josh Proctor certainly didn't help, not getting pressure up front. And again, we'll go in depth on the defense in a second. That doesn't help either. Inexperienced group, not doing anything different than last year, very predictable. I think it all stems down to coaching. And, they've made some changes there with Matt Barnes now calling the defense. They mixed some things in last week against Tulsa. Things aren't going to change overnight. Rome wasn't built in a day. This Ohio State defense certainly isn't going to be fixed in a week. So I think it's going to be an evolution throughout the season now. And you just have to hope that Ohio State continues to win and get by the rest of the year. And they continue to get better so that by the end of the year, they're in a position to still play for everything that's on the table, the Big Ten championship, a spot in the college football playoff. And that, for that last part, college football playoff, they need to be able to look like a college football playoff team. And I still think they can get to that point come, late November, early December. So Ross, let's dive into the offense a little bit. You don't have to go into everything, but I guess what are the main issues you're seeing? How would you fix them?
Yeah, so it's funny when you bring up back to the Dwayne Haskins and Justin Fields comparisons too. We kind of forget there was significant issues, even with how prolific the 2018 offense was throwing the football with the run game, because they did not involve Haskins until the very end of the season in the running game, which constantly led to them being outnumbered in the box. And so that's, again, been a big issue this year. Whether they would have included CJ Stroud, but for the shoulder, I mean, that's sort of just like one of those things I can't answer. I will say that overall in the Ryan Day era as a head coach, the quarterback hasn't been involved a ton in the rushing game. I think they kind of got their cake and ate it too. Some, especially last year, with the fact that like Justin Fields is such a good runner, even when he wasn't like actually involved in read plays, like defenses had to respect it. Whereas defenses aren't really respecting it right now. So it gets them back into some of those issues they had in 2018, where it's like, okay, are we going to throw a bunch of, run pass options and bubble screens to, try to get that guy out of the box? Then if we do that, or are we losing our identity, being able to run the football downhill? And so you kind of saw that play out. They're sort of still feeling their way, right? Against Oregon and Minnesota, they did a lot of those bubble screens. And I don't think they can get rid of that. I mean, it both keeps, again, tries to keep defenders from getting nosy against the run, while also like can't have Chris Olave going without catches. I know that was a weird game, and some of it was on him, but like it gets him and Garrett Wilson involved. But at the same time, you can see like against Tulsa, I'm sure during the week they're like, we are going to make sure we can run it. So they got in, 2 tight ends. They put Mitch Rossi at fullback. They got in the, either under center or in the pistol to run downhill a lot. And so they were clearly a commitment to like, we need to establish ourselves as a running team. And I agree with you on the offensive line. I said in August that, nothing against DeJuan Jones, but like, why mess with a good thing? You have like 2 great tackles. Matt Jones, to me, played well in the college football playoff last year. And then again, played well when Thayer Munford got hurt on Saturday. And so like, I would have just slid him into left guard, and now you've got like a good chunk of your line at least intact where they were. So I agree with you in terms of, you've essentially created like 5 new starters on the offensive line in some ways. And so I just think everything there is just still gelling, so to speak. And I do think it can click. I think that there's obviously things to nitpick, and I think that they need to keep working on the run pass balance and figure out, CJ Stroud to me has been pretty effective. The one good thing about like that, the way they ran the ball against Tulsa, is he's been pretty effective on those bootlegs and rollouts, and then you can take your shots downfield. But so for the offense, I think it's just a matter of sort of trying to get things firing together in unison. Whereas obviously, we can go into the defense, but there's bigger issues at play.
Yeah, I think you bring up a good point about 2018. Watching this offense, it before last week, it kind of reminded me a lot of what we saw in 2018, where J.K. Dobbins all of a sudden was not effective and everyone started bashing on J.K. Dobbins, but it's really the offense wasn't giving themselves any help to negate what the defense was doing. And, again, I'm not sure if it's CJ Stroud's shoulder or some other reason, but they don't seem willing to let him, any reads that you potentially see or what looks like a read option type play isn't. I think it's a designed handoff regardless. And you keep running those, it's not really going to get you anywhere. So I think they moved away from that a little bit last week, which was good to see. And hopefully they found something that I think that they can lean on, because as the offensive line continues to gel and get better, you have three, I think, pretty good and capable running backs. Travion Henderson looks to be a star. And as he gets more reps, he's just going to get better and better. And so I think if you can lean on that, it's going to make CJ Stroud's job a lot easier. As you wrote in your article that was published on Tuesday, everyone who's a member Buckeye Scoop or not, I guess it's a free article up on the front page. Go check that out and see Ross's breakdown of both the offense and the defense against Tulsa. Now, before we go to the defense, I do want to ask you one question. I think we probably have similar view on this, but in your opinion, through 3 games, a lot of people, I'll say, have been calling for CJ Stroud to be benched, whether they think he's hurt and shouldn't be playing, or whether they think Kyle McCord or Jack Miller or Quinn Ewers or someone else can be better. Is CJ Stroud the guy for Ohio State, in your opinion? And at what point should they think about starting another quarterback, if things don't continue to get better?
At some level, I wish I could provide a better answer than I can. I mean, I think Stroud has played pretty well overall. I mean, he's had some miscues. We also have to keep in mind that, like, he's had a much more difficult start to the first 3 games compared to, like, say, Justin Fields in 2019, where, like, not only had Fields played some the year before at Georgia, but, like, they played 3 games at home. Justin Fields had a great defense that was getting him the ball back in positive field position all the time. And they, like, knew that they could run the ball with J.K. Dobbins. And so it's sort of the perfect storm. Here they've been asking Stroud to carry a lot more for them for the most part. And, like, he's had plays he wants back. He's had, it's hard because whenever I sort of get down on him, then I'll see him make a nice read and a very nice throw. And as you said, there's a few balls that have been dropped. So the shoulder thing, it's so hard because without knowing more about it and, like, whether it would heal if he sat out a week, it's hard to say. But, until we see those other quarterbacks, you have to rely on the fact that Ryan Day is a good quarterback coach. He wants to win games. And, like, if he thought that another guy was going to give him a better chance to win, they would put him in, because, they haven't hesitated to try other guys at different positions this year. So, until we see that, I think we are rolling with CJ Stroud.
Yeah, I think that there's a lot of play here. I think they would have loved for the schedule to be a little bit different. They would have loved to have started with Akron and then go to Tulsa and then Oregon or Minnesota, right? Like,
exactly.
And that's what Dwayne Haskins and Justin Fields, those guys got to deal with. I mean, even, Joe Bowserman and Braxton Miller and things of that. And, dating back, I mean, traditionally it's cupcake games early, and then, maybe the second, third game of the year is fourth game of the year is those really tough out of conference games. So I think that's unfortunate. Obviously the shoulder injury, we're not in practice every day. We cannot, Ryan Day was pretty adamant that there was a large difference, a wide margin of separation between CJ Stroud and the other quarterbacks. And as you said, I mean, they threw Travion Henderson as a true freshman in there in a game that they had to win and not only win, but they wanted to come out and dominate. They've thrown former running backs in at linebacker on key plays. Yeah. Bryson Shaw, even when Josh Proctor was healthy, was playing key minutes. So as you said, they've
Cam
proven,
Martinez against Tulsa.
Exactly. And so they've proven, and I think Ryan Day, coming in as the head coach and making wholesale changes with the defensive staff, like, he's proven he's willing to make the hard decisions to win games. And so I think if he feels CJ Stroud isn't the guy to help best lead this team, he's going to do that. Is he going to take another loss to do that? Maybe, maybe not. I don't know. But I think, he feels right now CJ Stroud's his best chance to win. And I think one thing outside of the hard schedule that I think a lot of people are, and some of the unforced errors, the penalties and things like that, that could have changed some of the outcomes of games or just how CJ Stroud has been viewed, but they played three very different defenses that have shown different schemes, different styles of play. And I think that as a young quarterback who never threw a pass before 3 weeks ago, I think that that's really overlooked by a lot of people. Tulsa, that's a tough look, that 3-3-5, and they're bringing pressure. They have different coverages. I mean, you almost look at it and you're jealous from an Ohio State fan standpoint at the way they're able to disguise their coverages and their blitzes and things like that. So I think that that's something to really think about. I think they need to continue to roll with CJ Stroud, but I would love for them to they're 53-point favorites this weekend. I would love for them to jump up big, get Stroud out after a quarter and a half of the game, and let Kyle McCord play a full quarter, maybe let Jack Miller play a full quarter and see what those guys have. And it's good to get them reps just in case Stroud does have to leave a game.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, this was their problem last year too, is that the defense let teams hang around, and so they couldn't get backups in, and so that's some of that is unfortunately coming to fruition this year.
Yeah, and you've gone in depth on the defense, and I think there's a number of issues, but we did see a change in the guard, I guess, to some extent. Matt Barnes calling the plays, being on the sidelines, Kerry Combs, the eyes in the sky upstairs. Let's, just what did you see week over week? Was there any improvement there? I think the blind eye, even though they only gave up 20 points versus, that's probably a good number. If you could give up 20 every week, they should probably win every single week. But there were still guys flying wide open. They were still gashed for a couple of different big plays. But as we said, it's not going to be fixed overnight. So I guess what improvement did you see week over week, knowing that it's going to be an evolution throughout the year? And where are the glaring holes in this defense?
Yeah, I mean, I think you could see there were improvements, and you got to walk before you can run. But they mixed coverages better, both within their two base coverages, a cover 1 and cover 3. They also mixed in a little bit of cover 2, which is good. They mixed in a bunch of zone blitzes, and so they are trying to respond to being too predictable. Now they still got caught a couple times. I think some of those those bunch routes in particular for the 2 touchdowns are the probably the most glaring example of where they got picked, and Tulsa predicted they were man coverage, and they were, and they have to be able to deal with that one way or the other, whether it's trading off receivers or better technique or just mixing up coverages. But I think they definitely improved in terms of like filling gaps, which is a basic thing, but like was a problem against Oregon where like not every gap was accounted for. The defensive line didn't seem to be on the same page with the linebackers. So like, you start with like, at least for the most part of the game against Tulsa, and like, obviously caveat on competition, but they stop the run, which like, if they can stop the run, they can get teams more into like behind schedule. Then they can use some zone blitzes, some simulated pressures to try to generate some pressure and help the back end, because they're just not getting any pass rush with their front 4, which I said has probably been the biggest disappointment this year. So I think they need to keep building on what they did on Saturday. I think they are going in the right directions, and I think it was the right move to turn to Barnes, but it's going to take some time, and I don't think we should expect them, just based on how young they are on defense, to be some sort of shutdown unit this year. But they just have to continue to improve to be, frankly, average in support of the offense.
Yeah, I think I spoke to a fellow Big Ten staffer of a program who's going to be playing against Ohio State this year, and they saw some of the Tulsa game, they saw some highlights, they saw some of the game, and they haven't dove into the film yet. And I shared this in my A deck for subscribers on Tuesday. But one of the things they said was they were kind of pissed that Ohio State lost to Oregon because they felt that if they just kept winning, that nothing would have changed, and that they were kind of hoping that that was the case before, when they got to play them, because they felt that the defense was so predictable and so easy to scheme against. Now, you obviously have to have the talent to be able to execute against that, which Oregon certainly does and did clearly. And this team, I don't know if they would. I think they might, but they felt that even with a talent disadvantage, that there was still Ohio State was putting themselves at such an advantage with some of the things that they were doing, or not doing, I should say, not disguising coverages, not disguising blitzes, alignments, things like that, where regardless of a talent disparity, that they would be able to expose a number of different holes. And while there's still plenty of holes, and I'm sure that the film will help do that, I think you just get a little bit better every single week. Maybe get some new personnel in there once you start to see who's playing well. I mean, Cam Martinez deserves more reps. I thought Bryson Shaw was better last week than he was, in previous weeks, but Ryan Watts, I know, is being trained to kind of take over that free safety spot. Maybe they move Lathan Ransom to the deep safety and have Cam Martinez play that kind of slot safety position. I don't know exactly what they're going to do, but I think they need to figure out the personnel, but I think they just need to continue to not be so obvious in what they're doing, based on what I've been told from you and people people who are going to be playing against them this year. So that should be interesting to see how that one plays out.
I mean, if anyone can predict what you're going to be doing, it's half the battle right there. I mean, that's one of a defense's main tools is to not allow the offense to know ahead of time what exactly they're going to be seeing. So yeah, I agree. I still think they need to work out the free safety situation. They protected Bryson Shaw a little bit more in what they did. But I think, if they can get the personnel and, linebacker remains an issue. I think Cody Simon is going to be good. I think he's been, banged up a little bit. So if he can keep getting reps, get the personnel worked out. And then, as I said, they got to just find a way to be able to stop the run and then create pressure of some sort, because any defense is going to get exposed eventually if the quarterback has all day.
Yeah, it's kind of crazy. You mentioned Cody Simon. I think about it real quick. It's like CJ Stroud hasn't really played. Travion Henderson hasn't really played. All 5 offensive linemen are either new to their positions or new to the starting lineup. The backup tight ends haven't really played. You go to defense, the Teron Vincent hasn't really played. Obviously Jack Sawyer, JT Tuimoloau, the linebackers haven't really played. And then obviously Bryson Shaw, Denzel Burke, Cam Brown was hurt last year. So this is a really inexperienced group. If they can, again, find ways to win, find ways to get better every week, this could be a really, really good team by the end of the year. I'm not sure the defense is ever going to be where we want it to be, but if they can get 50% better, 33% better, and the offense starts clicking on all cylinders, I think you're going to have a really dangerous team by November. I think the question is, and this is where we'll leave the show, is are they at that point at the end of the year with one loss, the only loss to Oregon, or is this similar to maybe a 2005 type of season where they're a very dangerous team at the end of the year, but they already have 2 losses and are kind of out of that national title picture? So Ross, I guess my last question to you is, knowing what we know now, knowing what we kind of know is coming ahead, how do you see Ohio State finishing the season out? Do you think that they run the table, go 11-1, win the Big Ten championship, and have a shot at the playoffs? Or do you see a loss, potentially more losses for this group?
It's hard. I wouldn't pick against them in any game still. I think Penn State's going to provide a challenge, I think, especially defensively, but they do have that game at home. And, Michigan looks like world beaters. I mean, every advanced statistical thing will say like this 3-game stretch has been, pretty amazing, but I think everyone's sort of in a wait and see attitude. I mean, they still haven't been forced to really throw the football. And the defense looks great, but it's still a new scheme. And so, I think I hate to say like it's a coin toss, whether they lose another game, but I think they will certainly, as long as they can keep improving, and like, that's what you're looking for is improvement. As I said, like, right now in SP plus, they're first in offense and like 37 in defense. To your point, if they can just get the defense into like the 20 to 25 range, like that would be a significant improvement and they'd be in a much better position. And I think then their offense would look better because they'd be put in better spots. Right now they're out for a long time on offense. They, get the ball in weird situations. So, that would help get the ball rolling downfield, so to speak.
Yeah, I mean, right now, as we sit currently on September 21st at 3:56 p.m. Eastern time, it's hard to not see someone else getting them based on how they're playing right now. That said, they have more talent than anyone else in the conference. I still think, well, at least on the offensive side of the ball, I still think they're better coached than anyone. And if they could get the offense to click, they could probably outscore anyone. And they should still be favored in every single game the rest of the year. We'll see how Michigan does the rest of the year. That one could be interesting in the big house at the end of the year, but they still should be favored. I mean, as you said, the Penn State game at home, at Indiana, Michigan State's looking pretty good at Michigan. I mean, those 4 games could be tough. At this point, at Rutgers is an easy game.
Yeah, I was going to say Rutgers. Yeah.
These aren't easy games right now with the way this team is playing, but they do have the ability to still accomplish all their goals. I'm a seeing is believing type of guy. And I just think that the defense, I don't see it being close enough to where it needs to be as we get closer to entering the heart of the Big Ten play. I have full confidence the offense will get going, but I think it's going to get them at one more point. And I as of now, I would predict that they go 10-2, which would be a dream season for 99% of the teams in the country. But for Ohio State, and they could still win the Big Ten at 10-2 potentially, which is interesting if they go 7-1. Depends who the loss is to and how those other teams do. But it's going to be interesting to see the rest of the way. But thanks, Ross, for joining on. Always appreciate your insights. You can check him and his work out at BuckeyeScoop.com, and we'll see you next week.
This episode of Around the Oval was brought to you by Todd Pennington with Revolution Mortgage. If you've been thinking about refinancing or buying a house, check out our sponsor, Todd Pennington with Revolution Mortgage. They offer low rates for refinancing and home purchase loans, including first-time home buyer programs, down payment assistance, and cash-out home equity loans. Check out revolutionmortgage.com/tpennington.